Hello everyone, this is Venom, and today we're going to answer a burning question that has been on players' minds, especially Titan players, since the final shape came out. And that question is, why does it burn when I pee? Why doesn't my father love me? Is it gay if you're still wearing socks? Is the Titan kit weak? Now I'm not going to be just talking about the Prismatic Titan today. I'll be doing that Prismatic Titan overview video later on. Today this is just a Titan kit in general. The question is the Titan kit weak? And the answer is yes and no. The Titan kit itself is very strong, it works well and synergizes with what it does, and it is typically a melee defensive type build, a melee defensive type kit. However, the content that Bungie's put out that people are wanting to use a Titan on are not very conducive to melee or defensive builds, typically raids. In fact, I'd say raids are pretty much the only content that Titans don't excel at, and unfortunately, that's what people are trying to get through right now, the Salvation's Edge raid, and other raids as well. So right now, because so many people are trying to get through the raid, and they're frustrated because Titans don't have a damaging super that can be used at range, that one lack of a super is what's causing people to say that the Titan kit is weak, in my opinion. Now, just to kind of go through and prove a point, I'm going to go through all the supers that the Titan currently has, and I'll go through what I might adjust them to later on at the end of the video, if I were to adjust them to help put them on par with some of the Warlock and Hunter supers. So we're going to start with the Arc subclasses, and the Striker subclass. We of course have we've got the Fist of Havoc, which of course is a roaming melee super. You can't really use this at range at all. And of course we got probably the only super that you could consider range for Titan that's really strong, that's not really a roaming super, and that is a Thunder Crash. The problem with the Thunder Crash is that the Titan launches his entire body, and you're going to end up landing right next to the boss if you're not out of bounds. So unfortunately, even though Thunder Crash is definitely one of the strongest supers in the game, especially with the Curse of Falling Star on, you can't really count this one as a really usable range super. This is one where if you're doing a raid, you're going to wait till the boss is like one hit point left and then use this just to get the stylish finisher kill. That's it. So this is not really going to be a range super. This is one you're definitely going to want to use to either travel around or use kind of in melee range still, because again, you will be in melee range of the boss in the best case scenario when you're done using it. Next up for Strand, we've got the Blade Fury. Now, in my opinion, this is probably one of, if not the best roaming supers in the game. It is fast, it is strong, and it lets you suspend enemies very quickly and suspend whole groups of them, not just single enemies. And you don't have to be close to them like you do with the Hunter super. This one you can actually use at range. So, in my opinion, one of the best roaming supers in the game. However, it is still a roaming super that's based on melee. So, unfortunately, again, this is not one you can really use at range. For Behemoth, for the Stasis subclass, again, we got Glacial Quake, same thing, one of the really good supers in the game, it's a good roaming super. This thing does shred bosses that are stationary, it does some really crazy damage to Ribbon if you haven't seen it, so go check it out if you haven't. This is a very good one, again, good for PvP, good for some bosses, however, again, it is a roaming super, there's no real good range options for this one. In fact, what range it does have on it, it's only going to travel on the ground, it's definitely not going to hit anything that's, say, flying. So this is going to be another one that is in desperate need of some kind of range option for it. Next we got Solar, and while technically Hammer of Soul is a range super, it doesn't really have really good range on it, and it's not that strong. This is one you're definitely still going to be using mainly for ad clear or PvP. Now Hammer of Soul is fun, don't get me wrong, and Burning Maul are both good, but they're still really going to be classified as roaming supers. It's not really like a one and done or super strong single shot super like the Warlock and the Hunter would have. So unfortunately, even Solar doesn't really give us what we need in this case. And then finally we come to Void. Now, in my opinion, Void has got the most fleshed out amount of supers. Of course, it's got 3 different ones. Titan's just got the Twilight Arsenal. It is a fun super. And even though it is a range super, this is not going to be a boss killer. At least not in the form it is right now. It is kind of a niche super. It is fun. You can use it against a lot of ads. You can use this to kind of help against some yellow bars. You're not really going to be doing super boss damage with it though, but it is a fun one to use. You're going to get more mileage out of your Ward of Dawn and your Sentinel Shield in today's sandbox than anything. Especially in Raid, Sentinel Shield is going to be a huge help. Or if you're running the Saint 14 Summit with Ward of Dawn, it's going to help you do some boss damage and get your overshield up. So it's got a great suite of supers here, but none of them are going to be really good for boss damage as far as range, as far as actually putting damage on the boss. You're going to support your teammates doing damage, and even help yourself a little bit, but you're not going to actually have that super doing damage itself. Now, I keep talking about range supers versus, melee range. Why is that so important? Well, the times that people are having real issues with the Titan class is when you have to deal damage to a faraway enemy, to a ranged enemy. Let's take the new raid, for example. The very last boss to witness, you have to damage him at range. Now, for the most part, most of your damage, or at least a lot of it, should be coming from your weapons, your heavy weapon and your special weapons. And then, of course, if you got a ranged super, you can go ahead and use that. Now, the Hunter and the Warlock both have ranged supers that they can use. Now, the Hunter definitely has the best ranged super in this case. It's got the Golden Gun, and it's got the Still Hunt Exotic, which they can use in combination. The Hunter can do a crap ton of damage against the Witness. It is just an overall good kit for the Hunter. Warlock also has some pretty good supers. It's got a couple range supers, some really strong options. Personally, I like using the Nova Bomb and Cataclysm, and it does really good damage against the Witness. However, we come back to the Titan, and they don't have a range super they can feasibly use against the Witness. Now, the Titan can put down a bubble before the damage phase starts. It's not going to last too long, because by the time the pillar rises, your buff will be mostly gone, but you can get a little bit extra damage on it. Or they can raise up their banner shield and help protect their team, and help them do a little bit more damage themselves, but of course that means that the Titan is going to be taking himself out of the DPS rotation. So, unfortunately, there's still going to be less DPS no matter how you look at it, although you will be helping your team with the defensive portion of the encounter. So, again, even though the Titan does have some good options for the raid as far as support, there still aren't any good range options. Now, there are good options for damage for the second encounter, which has a boss in it. There's no issues there. It's just only encounters where there are range enemies, and that's what the big deal is. And it's a really big deal right now because the newest raid, Salvation's Edge, the final boss is a range boss. But let's take another raid, for example. Let's take the Kingsfall raid. Well, when you're fighting Oryx, he is a ranged boss. You can't really get up close to him and do damage. You do have to do a lot of damage from afar, and unfortunately, none of the Titan abilities are really going to do that. Now, yeah, you can technically use your Thunder Crash as a final hit, but again, that's more of a gimmick than anything. You're not going to be using that for your regular DPS rotation. Now, my question to you is the fact that the Titan cannot do damage to bosses without their weapons at range, does that mean that they're a bad class? Does that mean that their kit doesn't work? Well, no, and in fact, I'd say for Grandmasters, Titan is probably the best class to take in, and in fact, I think it's only raids that Titans really kind of fall behind. In every other content, Titans are awesome. But I'm going to prove it. I'm going to go through it right now and show you all the content there is in the game, and I'm going to show you, hey, this is what they're good at. So here we are on the actual Vanguard playlist, and I'm just going to go through each thing one by one and, tell you if the Titans are good or not in here. And the very first thing is going to be just regular Vanguard Ops, Strikes. There's no bosses really in Strikes you got to worry about being range, and even those that do, they're not really that strong, so you don't really have to worry about it. You can take a whole team of Titans in here and not really be in any disadvantage versus Warlocks or Hunters. In fact, you'll probably do a little bit better because you have those defensive options that will come in handy and will be much stronger on the lower tier content like Strikes. Now, the same does go for Nightfalls and Grandmasters. I'm going to put these in the same category. I'm just going to talk about Grandmasters because it's just the hardest version of a Nightfall. And Grandmasters Titans are amazing, especially with the Strand subclass. That's probably one of the, if not the best subclass to take into a Grandmaster. You can suspend for days, and Titans are strong. They've got defensive options. It's amazing. Now, is every single Titan build going to be great in Grandmasters? No, but not every Hunter or Warlock build is going to be great for Grandmasters or Raids either. So, what builds that are good for Grandmasters for Titan are amazing. Now let's take a look at the new kid on the block, Onslaught. Onslaught's just going to be a wave shooter, basically, and yeah, Titans excel here too, especially with the defense. Well, there are a lot of enemies that come in near the later options, usually like the last couple big waves, right before you get to 50, are really hard to get past. Having those defensive options really helps, especially if you're doing something like Legend Onslaught. So, Onslaught, again, Titans excel at. There's no real need to have range damage or range supers in Onslaught. All the Titans melee supers work just fine. Next up, Gambit. Again, very few bosses, if any, that need to be taken out from range. I think it's just that floating meatball that really have to be at range to hurt. And even then, it's just floating right above your head. For the most part, you can take a roaming super and do just fine in Gambit. And in fact, roaming supers are going to be great when you're invading the other players too. So, Titans excel in Gambit, no problem. Now, Crucible in every form, typically kind of a skill issue. Hunters do typically reign a bit higher in Crucible, but that's just because of how their kits are. They are dodgers, they are kind of the PvP kings. However, Titans can perform in PvP as well. Oftentimes it comes down to how good are your gun skills, how is your aiming. So, yeah, Titans don't have necessarily a significant disadvantage in here. In fact, having the bubble shield, I think, is one of the most hated things to come up against in Crucible, going up against a Titan with the bubble shield up. So, yeah, I don't see Titans having any significant disadvantage by not having a ranged super here. In fact, some of their melee supers are extremely annoying to come across. Now, what kind of content do we got left after that? Well, we've got dungeons, which again, you can take Titans through dungeons, no problem. Most of the bosses there, you can go ahead and use your melee supers and have no issue with. And then there are the raids. And unfortunately, the raids are the part where Titans fall short, and it's not even every single raid. Now, some raids, Titans do just fine. Crow's Inn, for example, You have a good time using a Titan there. Fighting Crota with a group of Titans using melee supers, it's pretty easy actually. It's actually kind of fun. And again, certain encounters in certain raids, you can still take Titans too. It's just certain encounters in certain raids that people, unfortunately, can't use a Titan for, or are not very good at using a Titan for, I should say. Now, overall, does that mean that the Titan's kit is bad? No, it does not mean that the Titan's kit is bad. The Titan's kit is actually very good. They got very good, strong melees, and that's what they do. That is their whole thing. They are a defensive melee character. However, Bungie is really bad at making content that lets that character design and lets that kit really explore it in raids. And that's kind of the problem that Bungie's had with some of their boss designs for raids. They're constantly having bosses that are far away that you can't really damage. Or they have bosses that you have to stand on a certain plate for, so where you could technically melee them, you can't really get off the plate to do melee damage. Think the Caretaker and Raw Disciple. That's one you could easily melee down if you didn't have to stand on the plate to do damage. Now, Roth, the very last boss, you can use melee against, and it is fun to do that with a Titan. So that one does work, and I do oftentimes see Titans doing melee supers there, not just Thunder Crashes. So that is one that actually does work out. It's a final boss that you can actually damage with melee. Unlike, again, something like the Witness or like Oryx. Now, how would I fix each class to give them some kind of range super to be on par with the Warlock and Hunters? Well, we don't need to put a lot of range supers on here. If we really want to do that, we only need to have a couple for a couple of subclasses. And I think the first one would be, I would add additional functionality to Thunder Crash. I would make it to where after you Thunder Crash, once you hit your target, as long as you weren't out of bounds, you had a couple seconds grace period where you could hit the super button again, and it would teleport you right back to where you initially Thunder Crashed from. I think that would be a good way to make Thunder Crash viable for range damage. You hit the enemy, and then you pause right there in midair. If you hit your super button again, you teleport back. If not, you drop down to the ground, and you can fight them at melee range if you want to. Again, I think that'd be a good way to make Thunder Crash viable for long distance range damage. Now, for Strand, I don't think we need a range option, but I think a support option would be pretty cool. Imagine taking something like the Banner of War and turning that into a super. You know, slamming a banner into the ground, kind of like the Warlock slams a sword into the ground, and make a Banner of War super that, say, gives everybody standing nearby woven mail and gives their weapons unraveling. That'd be a pretty cool super. Now, we wouldn't want to make it the exact same thing that Will of Radiance is, and we don't want to make it too busted so it gets nerfed, but something to where, you know, it gives you some really good defenses, or even maybe make you invulnerable for like 5 or 10 seconds, something like that, and then give your weapons the ability to either suspend or unravel. I think that'd be a good option for the Strand Titan. Now, for stasis, I think letting the Titan throw, say, 3 or 4 diamond lances that have the Power Saber Golden Gun would be a really good option there. That'd be a great range option. We already have diamond lances. I say give us a super to where we just like toss a few of those at an enemy, or maybe just one big one. It explodes for massive damage. I think that'd be a perfect range super, and it already works with what they've already got in their kit. Now, as for a solar, I say let us throw one huge hammer at an enemy. It embeds into it, and then it just starts igniting or scorching that enemy and doing massive damage over time. I think that'd be a pretty good DPS super. Just a big old hammer that hits the enemy, sticks to him, and it does damage over time. That way you can go ahead and start hitting him with your weapons, and you're doing damage with your super and your weapons at the same time. I think that'd be a good idea. Add one more big-ass hammer, or like a sticky hammer or something, that you can hit the enemy with and do damage over time. And then finally for Void, we of course already have 3 supers. I'd say give us an exotic that turns Twilight Arsenal into, say, a single shot axe, and we could throw that at an enemy and just do massive damage. Imagine just an axe that is like big as hell that you can toss at it, and you can toss at a boss to basically do Nova Bomb type damage with. That would be pretty awesome, I think. Give us a super that lets us do that, and that maybe gives us back energy the more damage we do, kind of like the Blades of Galanor. That'd be awesome, I think. So, that's going to do it for today, guys. Again, the overall question was, is the Titan Kit weak? No, I don't think the Titan Kit is weak. I think the Titan Kit does great. I think it works, and it's very functional for what it's supposed to do. I think Bungie just needs to be a bit more diverse in their boss design. I think if they want us to start doing stuff other than distance precision damage, like with linear fusions, or would say Still Hunt or Golden Gun, if they want us to get away from metas like that, they've got to really start changing the way they make their bosses. If you make your bosses to where they just stomp you and one-shot you as soon as you walk up to them, you're never going to see us do something like a shotgun meta or something like a melee meta. It's not possible. Now, granted, yeah, there are some bosses that they have made we can do damage to, such as Crota, such as Drolk. Those bosses are actually pretty fun. In fact, I like the fact that Crota actually goes through and they can one-shot you out of your Well of Radiance. They can destroy the Well of Radiance. They can destroy the bubble. I like enemies like that. I like the fact that Rolk, when you're fighting him, he actually chases you around and tries to fight you. He tries to kick the crap out of you. It's become a meme in the community, and it's one of the most fun fights in Destiny 2. I like fights like that, especially when they're final boss fights. A big boss actually coming up to you and trying to fight you hand-to-hand versus this. And I'm not saying the Salvation's Edge boss is bad, but, you know, it's one thing to fight something like Rolk and something like Crota when I actually feel like I'm fighting him. It's another to just be doing mechanics, to just do damage against, say, Orcs or against the Witness. And I honestly prefer the Crota fight and the Rolk fight myself. But that's just me. So, that being said, please let me know what you think down below. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and I will see you all on the next video.